Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I wanted to do a GURPS Q&A from Fallout's development. Now, a few months ago I posted a video called AD&D Questions from Teenage Tim, where I found a list of questions that I sent in to TSR when I was a teenager, back when I was playing Advanced Dungeons & Dragons in the early 80s. I'll link it below, the whole video. You should know they didn't really answer. However, the same thing happened when I started making Fallout using the GURPS system. Ran into a bunch of things I was having trouble figuring out how to code. I found 8 separate emails dating from April through December of 1994, so really early in the development. I think it was just me and the two Jasons. What's really cool is Steve Jackson answered, and he answered in detail. So this might be a long video, but I wanted to go over it all because if you want to see the kind of back and forth that goes on between a programmer and a tabletop RPG designer, this is the real deal. These are the kind of things I needed to know in order to write code. Because you can't tell a computer, figure it out. So, I will go over the 8 emails in order. Email 1, dated April 8, 1994. Hi Steve, I need some clarifications of some rules. I may seem to be getting picky, but if you've ever coded, you know the computer won't let me get away with being vague. First question. Do the rules for raising a skill that is defaulting to another skill apply to a skill defaulting to an attribute? Basically, I'm having trouble with carousing, which defaults to health -2. For a physical average skill, that is like having half a point in the skill when you use it as at default. So would be putting half a point in carousing raise it to health -1? Or would it stay at health -2? I'm currently going with the former, but I think this is the only skill that's affected by this. I couldn't even find a mental very hard skill that defaulted to IQ 4, -4. Answer. Carousing. I think you found a bug. Clearly, either carousing should default to health -3 or the skill should be treated as physical easy rather than physical average. I lean towards the latter, but I'll throw it out to discussion to the IO group. What do you think? My second question was, do you want me to implement the modifying dice plus adds rule on the sidebar of basic page 114? This is the rule that converts +7 to 2D, and remember in GURPS a D is just a 6-sided, and +3 to 1D, thus preventing big adds and converting them into dice rolls. I like the +7 part, but not the +3 part. People here seem split on whether they like the rule. His answer? For game purposes, you might even consider leaving +3 alone and converting +7 to 1D +3, conserving some of the guaranteed bonus. I'm not religious about it. It's an optional rule to start with. Third question. Are there any defaults that are positive, like short sword +1, or direct, like whip? Just wondering if I should bother making the engine understand such things, or if they're always going to be minuses. Answer. I hope there are no neutral positive defaults. There shouldn't be. That would imply that studying foo skill would make you better at bar skill than directly studying bar. I think you should make the engine spit up if they detect any proposed such default. And I did. And we're going to get back to this. Fourth question. How do I handle the case where skill C defaults to skill B and skill B defaults to skill A? I understand that if you have a few points in A but none in B, you can't default C off B. But what if you have a few points in B too? Does C default from B's skill level or from the level B would just have from its points? Confused? Here's a concrete example. Language defaults to IQ, writing defaults to language -5 or IQ -5, and research defaults to writing -3 or IQ -5. Let's say I have an IQ of 10 and I put 20 points in languages. And I'm assuming languages is mental average, didn't say. So now I have a skill of 19. That gives me a writing skill of 15. Research defaults to 5 from IQ. Now I put 2 points into writing. Since I have writing at IQ +5, I should have 12 fake points in there already. So 2 more would give me 14, or IQ +6. So my writing skill is now 16. So here's the question. Is research, previously a 5 skill, now 13 based off of writing skill, or 7 based off my skill in writing with my 2 real points? Personally, I think research should go to 7, not 13, because research does not default to languages and shouldn't gain levels from it, even indirectly through writing. In game realism, It means if I speak French well, I might be able to write French well too, but it doesn't mean I can do research in French any better than I can in English. If I learn a little writing skill, I'll become even better a French writer, and my research skills improve a little too, but not a sudden jump. Granted, this example is contrived, but I need it for consistency in the program. There are other examples of this happening in the game. Physician goes to veterinary, goes to zoology, or diplomacy goes to politics, goes to political science. Help. Answer. I never thought of this contingency. 90% of the delay in this reply was caused by working through it. In the end, I agree with your preferred solution. If you can code it, go for it. But I'm inclined to continue to ignore it in the printed text. Email batch 2 asked May 12th, 1994. In fields allowing optional specialization, can a character buy both the base skill and the specialized skill to avoid the -1 penalty on base skill questions? For example, can I buy astronomy and also astronomy comments? I don't see why not. Answer, it's legal but not cost effective. Suppose I have an IQ 10 and I study MH astronomy. Mental hard. For 4 points, I can learn the skill at IQ level, but if I specialize in comments, now I have effectively astronomy 9 and astronomy comments at 15. Now, if I do what you suggest, I spend 4 points without changing my astronomy comment skill, and I gain new unspecialized astronomy skill of 10. But suppose instead I just put 2 points into further the study of astronomy. Now I have it at skill 11, modified down to 10 in the unspecialized subject, and my comments knowledge goes up to 16. Something you didn't ask, but which would be legal, buy the same scientific skill twice in order to have more than 2 optional specializations. Question 2. Does having eidetic memory, EM, let me spend a 1/4 point on a skill? Similarly, does having EM2 let me spend an 1/8 point on a skill? This seems wrong, but we've been discussing eidetic memory a lot here, and I want to adopt how magic uses EM as a bonus to spell level. I think the reasoning applies to all mental skills, that EM is just rote learning and not true understanding. So perhaps EM1 gives a +1 to all mental skills, and EM2 gives a +2, and reduce the cost a bit to reflect this. What do you think about these changes? Answer. As sensible as any, we know that eidetic memory is going to change in the next edition, 4th edition, when we do it, and I don't allow 1/4 point or 1/8 point expenditures, just because that lets EM characters study every skill in the book, which is abusive. Reduce cost on the way you suggest might be 20/40. We need to play test. Next email, dated May 20th, 1994. We were busy in May. Do specialized skills require prerequisites and defaults of the same specialization? For example, if I buy Teamster, which requires specialization and specialize in horses, is my prerequisite animal handling, or is it animal handling horses, or can either skill be used? Answer. That's not a stupid question, just a new one. I never said it was stupid. Anyway, he goes on, use the base skill as the prerequisite. Specialization is not required. If it exists, it is not significant. Use the base skill as actually bought without the penalty for specializing. So yes, you could specialize in animal handling small rodents and then become a Teamster. Flunks the reality check, but oh, so much easier to deal with. Alternative answer, which is harder to program but more realistic. Something like Teamster could default to straight animal handling, or to animal handling with an appropriate specialization, but not to animal handling with an inappropriate specialization. Could you write a knowledge engine that understands animal handling cattle would let you be a Teamster for oxen? Similarly, if I'm trying to Teamster horses at default, does my skill default to riding horses -2, or will any riding skill do? Answer. Since both Teamster and riding require a separate skill for each animal type, Teamster can only default to the identical riding skill. Next question. Are defaults for tech level based skills just your skill at your TL, or at any TL? For example, if I'm TL7 and I want to learn mechanic spaceship drive TL8, can I default this skill to IQ -5? Or do I take the -5 penalty for TL differences and then default to IQ -10? Or would that be double defaulting? Mechanic 8 to Mechanic 7 to IQ 5, which is not allowed. Answer. My head hurts. Mission accomplished. I don't think that exact question has ever come up. The reasonable answer might be, one can attempt a different TL skill at default, calculated as above, but if the TL is lower, but not if it's higher. Reasoning defaulting is not just an appeal to your common sense and cultural background. That will stand you in better, instead, with obsolete equipment than with things that have never been invented yet. I think it makes sense to say that if you don't already have some level of the skill, you have no hope of understanding higher level TL stuff. But I would listen to argument. Third question. Related to the previous question, can a skill default to another skill at different TL? For example, can Engineer Spaceship Drive TL8 default to Mechanic Spaceship Drive TL7 at -6? Or would it be -11? Or is this double defaulting? Answer, that's double defaulting. The next email, this was dated May 31st, 94. So that's the last 3 emails were all in May. I was like bombarding Steve Jackson games with emails. First question. The super strength, thrust, and swing chart in the appendix, page B248, contradicts the progression of the chart on page B74 for the strength of 28 and greater. I assume I'm supposed to use the newer chart, but I wanted to check. Also, some people with an older book, like me, may think the program isn't working correctly for high strength, and this is something that we should mention in the program's manual appendix. Answer, yes, this is the right thing to do. 2. I found some skills that default to another skill with no minus. Gesture defaults directly to sign language, and first aid defaults directly to physician, and bicycle defaults directly to motorcycle. I asked you about this in an earlier email, if there were no defaults that were not negative, and you responded that I should have the engine spit out any such default. Fortunately, I can handle direct defaults, so this isn't a really question. It's just an FYI. There are direct defaults. Answer, okay, thanks for reminding me. Third question, musical ability only costs 1 point per level. Why then would anyone ever put more than 1 point into singing or into a particular musical instrument? For 1 point per level, you can increase those skills indefinitely by simply increasing musical ability. Answer, the moral of your story is clearly mini-maxers have never bothered with those abilities at all, or it would have been noted before now. Of course, the current rules reflect reality. It's easier to be born with huge talent, very arduous to improve it. Maybe if we make musical ability one of those advantages that can only come at creation, empathetically so we can keep, embrace, and document the current situation. Question 4. Rather than have dyslexia worth -5 or -15, do you mind if I make it worth -5 and make illiteracy a prerequisite? The point values are still the same. The combination is still -5 or -15 depending on your culture. Answer, sounds good to me, and that's what I did. The 5th email, this one was dated June 6, 1994. Is freefall a tech level based skill? The description in Basic 48 says it is, but the instant character sheet says it's not. Normally I'd go with the book, but the idea of a different tech level affecting someone's ability to operate 0G is a bit hazy to me. Apologize for the siren. If I stopped recording every time a siren by this place, I'd never record. Anyway, his answer to that tech level question was, I think you're right. What I had in mind was that different kinds of spacesuits, etc., you might be using, but that's familiarity at most. Second question. While on the subject of tech level based skills, wouldn't cooking be tech level based? I certainly don't know how to kill, pluck, and dress a chicken, but my grandmother did. But she'd be confused in my kitchen where I use 3 different types of pot materials, and she'd ignore the microwave or the Cuisinart. Answer. I'm not sure that cooking with modern gadgets is even really cooking. How much skill does it take to know which box to stick the food in? It says on the food package what box to stick it in. Yeah, I know it's not an answer. It's just a reaction. Smiley face. Third question. After my past several questions to you about skill defaults involving tech level based skills, here are the rules I plan to put into the program. Imagine skill A defaults to skill B -4 or IQ -5. The defaults for skill A are skill A at a different tech level, modified by minuses on basic 185. Skill B at the same tech level, -4. Or IQ -5, modified by any tech level differences on B85. Example, Joe's a TL8 character trying to fix a TL7 spaceship using Mechanic Spaceship TL7, in which he has no points. His defaults in that skill would either be Mechanic Spaceship TL8 -1, Engineer Spaceship TL7 -4, or IQ -5 -1. Sound okay to you? Answer, okay. Email 6, June 13th, 1994. Can someone use a skill at a default without having the prerequisites? Reading Underwater Demolition leads me to think they can, but then little bugs creep in, like using accounting at default without having literacy. I see 3 solutions. You may see more. Solution 1. No, to use a skill, even at default, you must have all the listed prerequisites. 2. Yes, you can have a skill at default without having its prerequisites. 3. Maybe. You don't have to have all the prerequisites, which are skills, but you must have all the prerequisites, which are advantages, disadvantages, or anything else. Any ideas? This question is making my head hurt. Answer. I would have said 2 until you pointed out the accounting literacy problem. So let's go with 3. Question 2. When a non-tech level based skill defaults to a tech level based one, I'm assuming I can just use the best one. Is this right? For example, prospecting defaults to geology -4. If you have geology TL7 and geology TL8, I default prospecting to the higher of the two, since prospecting has no idea what tech level it's based on. I don't modify its skill level based on the TL modifiers on page B185, correct? Answer, yes. 3. FYI, I found a positive default, and luckily it doesn't break my code. If you have status 1 or higher, you get savoir-faire in your current culture at IQ +2. However, this made me realize that Lance wasn't the only skill that had defaults with prerequisites. So I programmed the engine to understand such rare beasties. Steve Jackson answered, woo. And I'm quoting. Email 7 and September 23rd, 1994. 1. Why are limited majories in GURPS Magic, page 104 to 105, listed under disadvantages? They cost points. They aren't worth points. Shouldn't they be advantages? Answer. Doe. I think that has to be considered a mistake. We put them there because they are less advantageous than real majory, but you're right. To Joe Average, they're advantages. Question 2. Can I take majory and limited majory? For example, can I buy majory 1 and solitary majory 3? What about 2 separate limited majories like necromantic majory and fire majory? This isn't buying 1 majory and putting 2 limitations on it. This is buying 2 limited majories. Answer. I never thought about that. As for majory 1 and solitary majory 3, this example seems reasonable and even interesting on the surface, but I have to ask myself, would it really work? I find myself having to posit several new rules and interpretations. As far as 2 limited majories like fire majory and necromantic majory, the combined costs are more than normal majory, while the combined benefits don't even add up to those 2 except for the piddling reaction bonus from fire elementals. I suppose if you let someone take majory 1 and sun majory 3, they could just say the effect is +2 at all spells when the sun is in the sky. But the overall answer is don't do it unless you're willing to sit down and work out all the permutations, because it just wasn't intended to be possible, even though it sounds truly neat. Third question. Do spells that are used to fulfill a spell count prerequisite have to be skill level 12? For example, Dispel Magic requires Counterspell and 12 other spells. Do those 12 other spells also have to be known at level 12 each? Answer, yes. All spells for a spell count prerequisite must be at level 12. Final question. Asked December 1994. December 7th. My scripter noticed that there are several skills that are mental very hard that default to a mental hard skill. He pointed out that once a player puts 2 points into the very hard skill, he should then place all remaining points into the hard skill. After a small number of points into that hard skill, this scheme allows not only both skills to rise, but the very hard skill rises 1 level every 2 points, rather than 1 level every 4 points. Examples of this trick include surgery based off physician, biochemistry based off xenobiology, genetics based off xenobiology, physiology based off xenobiology, and computer hacking based off computer programming. By the way, xenobiology seems like a steal. Answer. I have none in my archive. That final one never got answered. Anyway, I know this was long and detailed, but I hope you see the kind of nitpicky questions I had to ask to the designer of GURPS in order to figure out how to write the code for GURPS to run on a computer. And I hope that was interesting, and also an interesting look back at what Fallout development was like 32 years ago. I hope that was a fun Friday.